In 1997, a strange young man entered his debut feature film into the Telluride Film Festival. The critics despised it, but it caught the eye of legendary filmmaker Werner Herzog, who was one of the very few who absolutely loved it.
I picked up the phone and it was Herzog, and he was like, I've just seen your movie. It is the most audacious debut. He was like, you were the last foot soldier in the army.
Herzog would later be cast in his movies, where he was directed to do this and this.
You will not sin anymore.
Critics still didn't know what to make of it. Who was this emerging new voice, this aspiring filmmaker who apparently was already bored of movies before his career even began?
I get nothing from them. I'm just bored. There's nothing. It's like the film, you see the screen and it's dead.
An aspiring filmmaker who seemed to treat everything like a joke.
Oh, I do the sequel, probably.
The sequel to Titanic?
Yeah.
And who would continue to find new ways to provoke, new ways to break cinematic and cultural etiquettes, even as he broke into the mainstream with his Disney star-driven portrait of American hedonism and violence. Even as he moved beyond it, into the increasingly avant-garde and experimental, into the seemingly absurd.
Aisha Speed is the new Tarkovsky.
And yet, as his body of work took shape, so did a vision, one that, when seen in its fullness, also reveals a different story. It's the story of an artist at the very frontier of his art form, an artist whose boredom with the medium was actually a catalyst to push the boundaries of storytelling, to find radical images, and to expand cinematic language itself. An artist who doesn't just have a remarkably keen sense of the trajectory of our radically progressing culture, but also a profound connection to the deeper humanity that always lies hidden within each of its strange turns, always capable of finding beauty in ugliness and truth in absurdity. An artist who might indeed be the last foot soldier in the army, reminding us that cinema is, in many ways, still in its infancy, that we've barely begun to explore its full potential for articulating ourselves and our humanity. This is the story of America's most misunderstood filmmaker. This is the story of Harmony Korine. He said he walked around with VHS tapes, little movies he made as a teenager. His writing was apparently remarkable. His teacher once called his name in a creative writing class. He thought he was in trouble. He wasn't. New York City, the early 90s. Before he ventured off on his own, a 19-year-old Harmony Korine met photographer Larry Clark, who had been wanting to make a feature film about youth culture, and who eventually ended up asking Korine to write the script.
I probably wrote it in like a week at my grandma's basement.
The resulting movie, Kids, follows the parallel journeys of two teenagers over the course of a single day in New York City. There's Telly, who spends his time skating, drinking and smoking while hunting for the next young virgin to deflower.
Yo, how was that shit, yo?
Oh my god, so good, dude.
And there's Jenny, a former lover of Telly who accidentally discovers she has HIV and now tries to find the young man responsible before he can inflict any more damage.
Where is he?
Don't look for him, he's doing fine. Got a girl.
It was a controversial story, to say the least, not just because of its explicit depiction of pubescent debauchery, but also because of its rather nihilistic approach to it. In the end, nothing is resolved, no moral lessons are learned, and the audience is unapologetically left in discomfort. Yet, despite its mixed reception, the movie was a box office hit and would soon become a cult classic. As for Korine, however, it wasn't quite what he was aspiring to artistically.
Kids was never a story that I was destined to write or I was born to write. For me, Kids is more of a commissioned work. Right. Because Kids is very traditional, and that's what he wanted. He wanted something very traditional.
Still, Kids did give us a first glimpse into the kind of worlds and the kind of characters that Korine was interested in. And more importantly, the experience helped him to sharpen his creative vision. It gave him direction and an understanding not so much of what he would bring along with him, but just as much, if not more so, of what he would leave behind as he started his own journey of radical exploration.
As soon as that movie was finished, then I knew, not because I was dissatisfied with that movie, but I knew that I never wanted to write films for other people, and I never wanted people to write films for me. Right. So I immediately began to start with Gummo.
Houses were split open, and you could see necklaces hanging from branches of trees. I saw a girl fly through the sky, and I looked up her skirt.
Gummo opens with a young boy narrating the story of Xenia, Ohio, a town that was recently hit by a devastating tornado. Instead of a traditional narrative, however, what follows is a disjointed series of vignettes featuring the town's troubled residents, presented in a variety of media formats ranging from 16 and 35mm film to Super 8, VHS and Polaroid photos. It immediately captures the essence of Gummo and the essence of Corinne's fascination: imagery, scenes, and characters.
I wanted to create a new viewing experience. I wanted the film to be like a new kind of movie with visions coming, with images coming from all directions. I never remember plots. I can't stand plots. I don't feel like life has any plots. What I remember from films are scenes and characters. So I thought, why not just make a movie that consists entirely of that?
The portrait that forms out of this collage, however, might look off-putting, cynical, and even exploitative at first. Among the many problematic characters and scenarios that Corinne subjects us to, there are bored teenagers killing stray cats, sisters practicing being strippers, abusive drunks, and foul-mouthed boys dressed as cowboys destroying stuff in a junkyard. As film critic Natalie Keegan put it in a 2022 article on the movie, for those who have grown accustomed to the prevalence of Hollywood's overly romanticized portrait of poor people, always tenacious, proud, and hard-working, Gummo is a disruptive reminder that human beings are often not so noble, least of all when plagued with chronic misfortune. This also explains why so many critics initially rejected the movie, because, as Keegan continues, rather than welcoming this break from the status quo, critics dismissed Gummo as nothing more than a glorified freak show, totally unaware of how their own deeply ingrained prejudices are refracted through their extended observance of these individuals. Over the years, Corinne has listed many cinematic inspirations for his debut. For example, there's Alan Clarke's bleak and often violent depictions of the British working class, the social realism of John Cassavetes, the wildness of a now lost America as depicted in movies such as Scarecrow and Straight Time, and of course there's Werner Herzog, who we'll get to in a bit. But the one that probably stood out to me the most was the classic TV show Cops.
What's the problem?
I loved that show Cops. I had loved that show Cops for a long time, and because what I liked when the cops would kick the door down, and then all of a sudden you would see, it was the first time ever where you were allowed to see people's houses look like, the inside of people's houses. It felt really honest to me.
It's just a mess downstairs.
What's downstairs? Another bedroom?
No, that I did well. There she is.
Oh, hi, Tammy. How you doing?
Why are you hiding from us?
What are you afraid of?
So, I've been going through some old episodes from the 90s, and I know even back then this was not an unproblematic show by any means, but I think I can see what Corinne was seeing here, because while the show might feel designed to subject these people to ridicule, exploitation, and moral judgment, It's in this naked exposition of their private lives and of their private selves that you also find something that is weirdly humanizing. Something that, especially back then, back before the internet, back when there were still hidden worlds like these to reveal, does feel revelatory. That does feel like you're uncovering some kind of truth about America and about humanity itself.
I never have like spent much time thinking about like, you know, what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say what I'm seeing.
To be clear, there are explicit moments of tenderness within Gummo too. People caring for each other, people trying to ease each other's discomfort and misfortunes. But the real source of sympathy here, the real source of truth, I think emerges not out of the text, but out of the form, out of the radical honesty with which Corinne navigates the lives of people who could so easily be written off as reprehensible. Gummo acts as an invitation to take a huff of their ragged reality, of their America, film critic Carlos Aguilar wrote in a 2024 article for Criterion, the same year that Gummo was included in their collection. You can really tell critics have come around on this movie. It asks us not to offer sanctimonious disdain or pity, but rather to glimpse the turmoil of their rich interiority. And, as Aguilar concludes, that's why the transgressive potency of Gummo won't fade. Unlike that of other shocking American independent titles, Corinne's debut will remain controversial and singular because it portrays individuals whom most people, amid the righteous moralizing of the modern cultural landscape, would rather infantilize or demonize than see on screen like this.
Don't kill it, bitch. It's a house cat.
A big part of why Gummo felt so singularly realistic was simply because its foundations were actually real. The movie was filmed in Nashville, Tennessee, where Corinne spent a good portion of his youth among these communities, and a lot of the eccentric characters that we see in the movie were actually just people he knew, people who he grew up with. Others, like Bunny Boy and the foul-mouthed cowboys, were just plucked from the streets after Corinne saw them playing and swearing and basically doing exactly what they ended up doing in the movie.
And I looked at him as like the kid was 4 years old. You know, I'd never heard anything like that before, and it was amazing. So I wanted to capture that. So I went and I had to ask their parents for permission. Is it okay for your sons to use that language? And the father looked at me and he goes, "Fuck, dude, I don't give a shit.
This shitty-ass rabbit stinks!"
In this sense, Gummo is also a remarkably personal portrait, capturing something true and intimate not just of a piece of America, but also specifically of Corinne's America, a part of his life and his world that most movies so far, in his view at least, had failed to capture.
And a lot of what I was trying to do is the opposite of what I was seeing. And I was trying to get to a place that was more internal. There were just images and sounds and things that were specific to what I wanted to see in a way that I had never seen them before. I was really on fire at that point in my life. The ideas were really just like coming at me.
The ambition to capture something real, something true, about the world around him in a way that we hadn't quite seen before, seamlessly extended into his next feature film, released in 1999, Julien Donkey Boy. Starring Ewan Bremner, Chloe Sevigny, and the great Werner Herzog as Julien's stern German father, Julien Donkey Boy details the dysfunctional family life of a young man with untreated schizophrenia.
Come on, be a man and quit that moody proving.
Essentially, Julien Donkey Boy does for mental illness what Gummo did for class. It offers an unsettling portrait of what it means to live with schizophrenia, both for the afflicted Julien himself as well as for his family. And also like Gummo, the desire for honesty, the desire to create a movie depicting an unromantic yet humanistic truth, is grounded in a personal connection.
The character of Julien was based on my uncle. who's schizophrenic. I wanted to make a film about someone that was mentally ill, but I wanted to do it justice, because usually when you see these characters portrayed in movies, it's always like the cute, lovable, eccentric, the cute schizophrenic, and I think it's really crap. And I hate that. I wanted to show a guy with blood in his underwear hitting himself in the head, jumping out of windows. I wanted to show what it was really like, and the horror of schizophrenia.
Hey! Can't you? Stop! Stay! Stop!
By Corinne's own standards, and even compared to his later work, the production of Julien Donkey Boy remains somewhat of an outlier. The peculiar look of the movie was achieved by shooting on videotape, then transferring the footage on 16mm film, and then blowing it up to 35mm, which resulted in this heavily grained image that becomes almost impressionistic at times, and which undeniably contributes to conveying something about Julien's distorted inner life. And yet, as interesting of an image it is, the choice to shoot with video camera seemed to have been less about the specific visual of it, and more about how they can be used.
The thing that excites me about video isn't really the aesthetic of it, it's more what it allows for, the freedom.
Perhaps most importantly, shooting on video allowed Corinne to use the camera in all kinds of creative ways, most notably by hiding it on the actors themselves, thereby blurring even further the line between the staged and the real.
I could send them into real situations, and they could, without people knowing they were being filmed, that I could kind of steal something. I could steal something real or something that seems truthful.
Yeah, I might have seen it. I might have seen it.
The result is a movie that definitely isn't for everyone. In fact, as the renowned film critic Roger Ebert said in his review, Julien Donkey Boy seems hardly made for anybody. But as he also points out, and which is pretty much how I felt about it after watching it for the first time, as much as the movie feels like a jumble of discordant images, and despite not everything about it working in its individual moments, if you stay with it, there is a story that emerges, and there are characters that gradually reveal themselves.
No, don't go too fast. Wait, I'm way behind you here.
You understand, first of all, that the point of view is that of a schizophrenic person. Secondly, that the family is dysfunctional to any outside observer but functions in its own way for its members. Third, that the story is filled with genuine emotion and even love. An opera aria plays in snatches throughout the film, and when it swells up at the end, it is a lament for the suffering of these characters. For Ebert, Julien Donkey Boy demonstrated that Corinne is the real thing. An innovative and gifted filmmaker whose work forces us to see on his terms. And indeed, unlike many other movies where individual elements might be great on their own but don't really amount to anything transcendental, at this point, with both Gummo and Julien Donkey Boy, Corinne is establishing himself as a daring filmmaker who does the exact opposite, offering a kaleidoscope of peculiarities, images, facts, and fictions that are challenging and sometimes downright troubling in their own right, but that, when taken together, do ultimately add up to something more than the sum of its seemingly disjointed parts, to offer something ineffable that is hard to put into precise words.
It has such deep beauty, and all of a sudden something emerges out of your film which I would call truth, and it's only truth that happens in poetry.
The new millennium, a period of personal struggle and little creative output.
I just quit. I didn't want to make movies anymore. And I was also a drug addict, and also it just left me.
He made a music video, another TV movie about the provocative magician David Blaine, whom Corinne had befriended a few years earlier when they went to perform magic tricks for indigenous tribes in the Amazon. A time of dreams, of images rising out of the deep.
If you like it, you can put money here.
In 2007, Corinne released Mr. Lonely, his first feature film since Julien Donkey Boy. The movie presents us with two unconnected storylines running in parallel with each other. The first is about a Michael Jackson impersonator in Paris who, after performing at a retirement home, meets another impersonator who invites him into a strange commune of kindred spirits.
Sisters, are you ready?
Yes.
The second story takes place in South America and follows a group of nuns who slowly come to believe in some kind of divine destiny for themselves after one of them falls out of an airplane and miraculously survives. To me, this is Corinne at his most Herzogian. You have your outcasts on the margins of society in search of identity and belonging, you've got your absurdist scenarios and eccentric encounters along the way, and of course there's Herzog himself, playing as a priest.
The sisters, they live in chastity, but you don't. Okay. And that's why your wife has left you.
But perhaps above all, there's a kind of image-first approach to the storytelling. The feeling that all of this was conceived based on some strange, half-remembered dream or some lingering still from a moment of runaway imagination. Which apparently is exactly what it was.
I just started dreaming about like nuns jumping out of airplanes, riding bicycles in the clouds, and like I always like when I make movies. I start with like images first.
This is also what lies at the foundation of Herzog's filmmaking philosophy, that search for adequate images, for images that contain some deeper truth about who we are, about some aspect of our humanity, and which then comes to us as some kind of instinctual epiphany or revelation.
And you will find that in great poetry, it will occur to you very abruptly that there's a deep, enormous truth in this poem, and you feel like illuminated, and you don't have to analyze, you just know it instantly, because there's an ecstasy of truth that is in this poem, and in cinema you have this as well.
It's a huge influence as a person, and as a kid growing up, his movies meant a lot to me. The ones that I was most blown away by, I was always the Bruno S movies. The Kinski films I love, but the Bruno S movies were just, Strozak was a huge deal. Every Man for Himself and God Against All, like those, and even Dwarf Started Small. To see that type of that kind of weird mishmash of truth and fiction, and then realize that that there was a potion to it. That neither one of them on their own really was a big deal, but together there was something really so grand.
The blending of the factual and the fictitious, the enhancing of reality with the imagination, is a potent mix indeed, and one that is also highly relevant to Corinne's work.
It's almost like a subtle science fiction. It's like the real world except slightly tweaked, it's maybe a slight manipulation. But I'm always imposing my views, I'm always making things up.
We already saw it back in Gummo and Julien Donkey Boy with the non-professional actors and hidden cameras, and we'll see it again later when Corinne sends former Disney child stars into the Miami underworld. But it's in Mr. Lonely where it feels as if this friction is at its most textual, exploring the nature of truth as a human concept, as being neither fact or fiction, but as some third thing that emerges out of their collision. Our Michael Jackson impersonator is neither the great icon he pretends to be, nor is he a mere empty vessel devoid of any identity beyond his biological machinery. Like all of us, he's a dreamer.
I know this is all an illusion, a dream.
My belief is that all these dreams are yours as well.
I can see the hope in everyone's faces. They're all chasing a great dream.
And that is what poetry or painting or literature or filmmaking is all about.
What they don't realize is that they have found it already. They have found it in one another.
I would like to say that Mr. Lonely marks a moment of maturation for Corinne, and in some ways it does. By his own accord, he did set out to make something with a little more structure, that was a little more allegorical, with the one story serving as poetic punctuation to the other, and something that stylistically was a bit more classical than his previous works. He also mentioned that, being in his early 30s at this point, he felt like he had also just changed a lot as a person since being in his early 20s. But then again, not 2 years later, he went on to make Trash Humpers, which is the kind of movie where you look at the title and then you start watching it and it's like...
I don't know what I expected.
I never felt an allegiance to any type of specific filmmaking style or look even.
Released in 2009, Trash Humpers is a strange movie, to put it mildly.
Come on, that's it. Sleep, sleep! Sleep, boy, sleep!
The movie follows a group of elderly sociopaths, which are actually just Kareem himself, his wife, and a few of their friends in cheap old people masks, as they trash around and vandalize their neighborhood. While in some ways being a reflexive reaction against the overly long and overly professional production of Mr. Lonely, by contrast Trash Humpers was shot and edited within a month, it was still made based on many of the same core principles. There's once again a search for eccentricities, for strange characters on the margins of society, with many of whom it's hard to say if they were just some strange fella they found on the street, or if they were actors doing a bit, which I'm sure was the intended effect.
You're a fucking asshole, you better go home, because I'm trying to tell jokes up here. Okay, so there's this gay guy.
Like Mr. Lonely, Trash Humpers was also born out of images, out of lingering visuals in the mind. Kareem talked about seeing trash cans in the alleyways behind his house, which especially late at night would take on a strange, almost human form. They looked like they'd been kicked around, shoved, or punched in the gut, he said in an interview. He also remembered a group of elderly peeping Toms living down the street in what he assumed was a makeshift nursing home. Late at night, I would look out my window and catch them staring into my neighbor's bedroom. I couldn't tell what they were doing, but I knew it wasn't good. I think because the alleyway where I live now is very close to the one where I grew up, I imagined there was a connection between the beat-up trash bins and the peeping Toms, as if the old guys had somehow lived forever. To capture this unsettling, almost dreamlike vision, Kareem filmed this movie with the crappiest VHS camera he could find to create a similar distance to reality, to have the camera also be like an eye straining to see clearly in the dark, thereby transfiguring the image into something more akin to an hallucination.
I shot that way because I wanted the movie to be maybe less of a film and more like an artifact or something that like a tape that had been discarded or buried somewhere, thrown in a ditch.
The problem with Trash Humpers, however, at least from a critic's perspective, is that it's just hard to gauge how serious you're supposed to take all this. More than with any other film of his at this point, doing a self-serious critique of something that, at the end of the day, still mostly consists of this. It does make it feel like you're just being pranked, like the joke's on you somehow. It's one of those eternal questions of this kind of deliberately subversive art, right? Like, can meaning emerge out of the meaningless, value out of transgressiveness? Can you just tape a banana to a wall and call it a day? Personally, it's not my favorite form of artistic expression, and more than with Kareem's other movies, I can see why people would dismiss this one as having crossed some line. But then again, I do believe that thinking of Trash Humpers as more of an artifact, as a relic or a document, as Kareem has called it, rather than a movie, is probably the best approach, because clearly we're long past any conventional means of cinematic engagement here. But when just looking at it as more of a performative art piece, as something that mirrors something about ourselves and our society, then it does do something. And more than a banana taped to a wall, I'd say. To use Kareem's own words on his trash-humping elderly deviants, quote, "These people turn vandalism into an art form. They turn horror into something transcendent. It's admirable in a way. They see beauty in destruction. They seek what others don't. They're like shapeshifters. While you're sleeping, they're up, living under bridges and overpasses and behind abandoned strip malls. Murder is part of their vocabulary, how they express themselves. It's a primal thing for them, a performance, a transfer of energy that is at the core of the film. These are the characters, this is the energy that lurks in the darkness. This is what's below the surface. It's something deeper. It's been here a long time. End quote.
I wish I was that bird and I could just fly away.
They knew the truth about me, that I came from a great family of murderers.
In the 2 years after Trash Humpers, Julien also put out a remarkable amount of short films, with titles such as Mac and Black, Grudge Nap, Act a Fool, Blood of Havana, Curb Dance, Omshini Wham, and Snowballs. And honestly, I'm not really sure what to make of all these. There's some clear leftovers from Trash Humpers, the conjoined figures, the weird abusing of baby dolls, the old people masks also show up again. There's also some collaborations with other eccentric artists, but most often, these shorts are just random streams of visuals guided by a rambling voiceover, combining non-coherent existential musings with overly specific anecdotes.
They were always dirty, they reeked of fish and worms.
I believe that the earth is a big ball of shit. That's why the dinosaur died out.
Because many, many men will die. And I think it should be fun.
While none of these short films made a particularly deep impression on me, I also can't deny some of them did stick into my brain just because of their sheer absurdity and silliness, which I guess is a value unto itself and more than I can say of most other short films I've seen. But what I probably admire the most here is the way Julien just keeps making stuff, and the way he's not being so precious about every individual work. This is also very much in line with Werner Herzog, who's also had a tremendous output and whose voice as an artist is less defined by any individual movie of his and more so by the body of work in its entirety, which retroactively envelops even his least successful films into some greater project, some greater vision of what all this is all about. It's a very instinct-driven approach that I think very few artists have, an extroverted, almost egoless pursuit of whatever captures the imagination, whatever generated a curiosity, a fascination. And I do believe Julien is one of those.
I don't really have anything like specific to I don't have like a point. Never been interested really myself in making a kind of specific statement. It's more about a feeling.
The times are changing, the culture is moving, and so is he.
You ever been to a place and the psychogeography, you feel so connected to that place in a way that's beyond words? That's the way I feel about Florida.
He settles in a new city, a city of dreams and of shadows.
It's just like people go there because it's the sun and there's these dreams, the dream of the sun and but then it's just doesn't work out. And then people go back into the shadows and I always felt like there was violence in there.
He raves about Michael Mann's Miami Vice, watching it over and over, a new vision taking shape.
I would watch it without the sound because it's so textural, it's physical, and it's about colors to me and a type of an ambience and a tone which is is important to me.
When you say something is set in Florida, it's automatically a science fiction. Immediately you know anything can happen. And so it's a symbol in a lot of ways.
Let's cause some trouble now.
In 2012, Julien released Spring Breakers, the movie he is probably most well known for by general audiences, albeit infamously so, with the imagery of sexualized former Disney stars pursuing hedonistic delights while descending into a neon-lit heart of darkness remaining as controversial and iconic as ever.
Spring break.
Hit me, baby, one more time.
Spring break forever.
Looking back on it now, the movie stands as a continuation of the filmmaking philosophy that Corinne had employed before, building narratives around fragmented images and scenes rather than linear plotlines, blending real-world elements with stylized imagination, and of course the lean towards the provocative and the transgressive. But there's also a distinct evolution here, a kind of crystallization of a vision, of a concept, which he now refers to as a liquid narrative.
In my mind, I'd been trying to develop this style for a while, or this idea of motion and liquid narrative. Something that's more like a liquid narrative. It's something more tonal, it is about a kind of culture of surfaces, the way things look and feel. I wanted to make a film that had very little dialogue, that was more sensory, that was more like something as an experience that you felt, that kind of went through you.
The idea of a liquid narrative, I think, is a great way to approach and conceptualize not just Spring Breakers, but much of Corinne's filmography. It emphasizes the kind of non-linear movement that can feel chaotic and unstructured, but which nevertheless has a certain flow to it. A rhythm that you can attune yourself to and become lost in until ultimately reaching some kind of cathartic emotion. One that is less about conveying an explicit message or thought, and more about just engaging the senses.
Everybody's miserable here because everybody sees the same things. They wake up in the same bed, the same houses. It's their chance to see something different.
And this is what makes Spring Breakers so fascinating to me. The way it was designed, not along the familiar story beats of a traditional 3-act structure, nor like any kind of movie, really. But rather, as Corinne himself has said, like a piece of music, like a song that has a guiding melody, a continuing rise and fall of intensity, and even lyrics that are repeated over and over again.
This is my fucking dream, y'all. All this shit. Look at my shit. Look at my shit. This ain't nothing.
I was trying to make the movie itself like a pop song with hooks and choruses and certain lyrics, but also like the repetition, there was like a trance element to the film.
All this shit. It's a fucking dream, y'all. You like it?
It's important to note here that while this might make it sound like Spring Breakers is primarily a vibe movie or a tone poem, I don't think that quite captures the full scope of what it's doing.
It's way more than just having a good time. God, it was so nice to get a break from reality for a little while.
Personally, I've never really been a fan of these terms to begin with. To me, they've always felt rather reductive. Like they're an easy shortcut to use whenever a movie's themes and meanings aren't immediately obvious. You know, it's like, oh, it's a tone poem, so you don't have to think about it too much. You can just enjoy the vibes, it's a label that marks an endpoint to your discussion when it should be the beginning. You know, what feelings are emerging here? Why are they emerging here? What meanings do they carry with them? Brushing all this aside is to say that a sensory experience is more shallow than a narrative one, that there aren't any deeper workings and complexities to such a movie, which just isn't true. They're just harder to articulate.
I wanted mostly for you to feel always trying to get to a point that's beyond a simple articulation. I never really care, there's obviously meaning, but the meaning is really the residue of the image.
Corinne actually said this in relation to Gummo, but I think the idea of meaning being a residue of the image, as something that is not explicitly stated, but rather implicitly imbued as a sort of natural byproduct of sensory engagement, is also relevant here in Spring Breakers, where it becomes clearer than ever that in a Harmony Corinne movie, the form is also the main source of its thematic content.
This isn't the end. This can't be the end of the dream.
Here, beyond just conveying party vibes and the Florida ambience, the liquid narrative of Spring Breakers also captures the timeless experience of youth, or rather the distinctively youthful experience of existing out of time.
I was kind of like trying to explode the idea of time. So it's of the time, but really of no time.
Feels as if the world is perfect. Like it's never gonna end.
That's the thing with youth culture movies as well, is that they can be quite timeless.
Yeah.
Because everybody feels the same when they're that age.
Yeah, that's true. That's actually, yeah. I agree with that.
It's the ecstatic experience of a perpetual now, a heightened portrait of that brief period of life after being lifted up by the first true taste of freedom. A freedom that is at its purest here, unburdened by the constraints of reality and responsibility that eventually and inevitably assert themselves. A freedom that breaks the very flow of time itself, blurring together days and nights, the endless sunsets, the forever party.
You know, it would be really cool if we could freeze life. Freeze it and say, this is the way it's gonna be forever. Like, have this moment together forever.
Also, when you're younger, it's also kind of can become dangerous and murky because you never want things to end. It's like an energy. You get like amped up on a thing, and you just never want the, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Like days and nights and truth and fiction. Like you want it. I don't know. Like I wanted it all to be the same and like to never end.
But as Corinne also expressed here, it's a dangerous freedom too. It's like grazing some greater, overwhelming force that, when experienced in its absoluteness, obliterates not just the notion of time, but also those of morality, of reality, and eventually, of any remaining notion of the self.
Almost like a drug experience with a kind of transcendence, and then disappears and goes into kind of darkness.
This is also where Spring Breakers becomes a more contemporary critique, or at least an observation of contemporary culture, in which the movie's almost mythical idea of spring break becomes a greater symbol for the general trajectory that our society is moving along, increasingly detached from reality, increasingly overstimulated and superficial, a society that has exchanged true nourishment for a perpetual sugar rush.
Fucking pretend like it's a video game. Just act like you're in a movie or something.
It's about kids that are raised on video games and raised on YouTube clips and raised television babies.
Freeze, motherfuckers! Hands on the motherfucking air!
It gives us a glimpse of the stranger things to come, of what are probably the most avant-garde movies Corinne will make.
Hey.
But before we go there, we first have to talk about what is arguably Corinne's most conventional film, his grand stoner comedy, The Beach Bum. Released in 2019, The Beach Bum stars Matthew McConaughey as Moondog, a Florida-based stoner poet who's trying to finish his new novel while also navigating his relationship to his daughter.
How are you?
And struggling to get his share of the substantial estate of his wife after she dies in a car crash.
You gotta publish your novel or you get nothing.
You know, wanted to make a comedy, a kind of classic, or my version of a kind of classic stoner comedy.
I just loved like how high the films were, and the narrative almost felt like weed smoke, and it inhabits this idea of a kind of cosmic America that maybe exists and maybe it doesn't exist. But I wanted the film really to just be that, to be like a comedy, pure.
This might be Corinne's first movie to have an actual plot, to have a main character with explicit plot goals beyond just a fake pursuit of some abstract desire. It's still mostly made up of loosely connected vignettes, though. It still has that idea of a liquid narrative where scenes feel like they're mostly assembled out of fragmented memories of disjointed mini-adventures, guided by an emotional rather than a narrative flow. But even so, the bedrock is definitely more solid here, and the tone much lighter and carefree than Corinne's previous feature, which might give the impression that his ambition here really wasn't anything more than just making a straight-up comedy.
You know, I just wanted to laugh.
What the fuck? Man, that's just loaded.
And yet, I do feel like there's an interesting twist here, like there's a tension within the movie that adds layers of complexity beyond its surface-level accessibility and simple fun factor.
What makes you, Moondog, different than all these other people?
Seriously? The one's racing to the red line. The one's stuck in their ways, a little bit too busy to check inside and say howdy, howdy, doody.
While the Beach Bum's narrative might impose a plotline and a suggested character arc for our wayward poet, mainly through the secondary characters who are all trying to direct him in one way or another, and who by extension might reflect the audience going into a movie expecting to see some kind of transformative journey. Moondog himself seems to actively resist these external pressures and expectations.
Like, people want to break him. You know, there's always this tendency for people to want immoral characters or people with a kind of moral ambiguity to, like, break. And so hey, that's not a thing. That's not really a thing for him.
That shit's not for me, man.
Instead, in the end, no matter where the plot or the characters are trying to get him, Moondog, for better and worse, always ends up back where he was, back to who he was, living his life by his own rules and pursuing only what he himself desires above all.
He's like more of like a poet of life. Like, it's about the fun and the joy and the moment, the experience.
Made me feel beautiful.
What's probably most interesting, to me at least, is that while Moondog's hedonistic spin might be considered as comparable to that of our Spring Breakers, I do believe there's a categorical difference here. Because whereas our deviant youngsters are distinctively driven by external desires, chasing the ideals of freedom, pleasure, and prosperity as our contemporary culture has shaped them, which was a pursuit that also ended up either breaking them or swallowing them up entirely. In The Beach Bum, what we see is that while Moondog is definitely tempted by those same forces, especially those of wealth and luxury, he ultimately proves himself to be completely robust against them.
He's a sensualist, and is a kind of total freedom and abandon, and whether he's living in a mansion or under a bridge, he's making it happen. He's gonna be okay. That's the thing, it's like he's a soul that you can't break.
In this sense, The Beach Bum is not just Kareem's most light-hearted movie. It's not just a simple comedy. It is also a movie driven by a genuine optimism and idealism, as if Kareem wanted to capture his idea of a modern hero, his idea of a hypothetical being who would be capable of facing down our world's most destructive forces. Not just those of capitalism and consumerism, but also those of the more abstract pressures that have emerged in their wake. The pressure of ambition, of conformity and productivity. The pressure of having to be someone, of want and desire itself. All is challenged, all is defeated, so that out of the ashes there can emerge a vision of true freedom.
For me, it's like almost this like strange utopian ideal of this Key West representative like checkout culture, kind of fuck it all movement, where it's like people go to just kind of celebrate like a lack of ambition. I do like admire that. I like admire people who's like just like watch the sunset and live on houseboats, and you know, like I look at that and I find it desirable.
I mean, fuck, man. So many people trip themselves when they're running downhill. Life's hard enough. Why would you fucking want to do that, man? I mean, fuck, we're here to have a good time. I just want to have a good time until this shit's over, man.
Unlike his seemingly autobiographical washed-up bum, the post-Spring Breakers years actually marked his most commercial era to date. The strange, silly shorts made way for bigger commercial collaborations. Dior, Gucci, music videos with Rihanna and Travis Scott. He was in it more than ever, flowing with the radical movements of the culture, of technology, and of their increasingly strange convergence. Into the murky frontier of the future. He sees the writing on the wall. There's no going back now.
Find your own evolution. Evolution.
We put together this like kind of crew. It's closer almost like a design collective or something in Miami. It involves like a lot of tech and gaming, game developers, and there's some AI in there and a lot of VFX, and it's kind of this like interesting mix of people that like are basically experimenting and trying to develop this whole idea of maybe like what comes after normal films.
In 2023, Julien founded his own production company, EDGLRD. Sitting on the intersection of multiple creative mediums, from film, music and artworks to video games, VFX work, AI, streaming and other forms of aesthetic expressions. The idea of EDGLRD is to explore the world beyond all those traditional classifications. A world where all those things are increasingly becoming one and the same.
And a kind of like this idea of like singularity where it's like everything is starting to just become one thing. It's like everything and nothing. Like there is no meaning, so it really frees you up. It's all kind of post-meaning, right?
It's important context because while EDGLRD has technically produced 2 feature films with Julien as the writer and director, clearly these highly unconventional works are the result of a different kind of intention beyond just simple filmmaking, and should be approached accordingly.
I still don't even know if it's what you would call a film. I mean, it's a film, it's maybe not a movie. I don't really know. I've been calling them blinks because it's just like starting to use like a different type of language and not really linear storytelling in a way. It's a more kind of immersive thing.
I am a solitary hero. Alone.
The first of these movies was Aggro Drift, which was released in 2023 and tells the story of a tormented hitman on a mission to kill a demonic crime lord. It stars a somewhat recognizable Jordi Molla and also features Travis Scott, whom Julien had worked with a couple of times at this point. But of course, the most striking aspect about Aggro Drift is obviously the fact that it was entirely filmed with infrared cameras, which feels like Julien was just doubling down on his idea of a liquid narrative by adding one of what I guess can be called a liquid image.
They were just very beautiful, the images, and strange and kind of very kind of liquidy and vibey, and it just seemed right. It was also like kind of capturing like heat and souls.
The red and blue imagery was also layered with special effects to make the whole thing feel even more like a drug-induced hallucination, or some kind of vision of an alternative plane of existence, which I think was also the primary goal here. To transport the viewer into a world so strange and so alienating that the mere perception of it becomes an experience in its own right.
Now is really the first time where I felt like you could really encounter a kind of deep world creation in a way that wasn't possible even a year or 2 ago. So Aggro was really an attempt, for me, I'm not saying this is the future and this is whatever. For me, it was an attempt to see what was beyond film, or what was beyond a kind of linear storytelling.
In this sense, Aggro Drift feels like an attempt to create not just another sensory experience, but rather to explore what such an experience would be like in its purest form, to explore the potential of a mode of engagement where the complete meaning of an image is entirely transferred through direct perception, without any kind of analyzing or other forms of mental post-processing as the mediator between perceiving and understanding. In other words, it was an experiment, and a challenge perhaps to once more push the boundaries of what to Julien still feels like an overly stagnant art form, one that in many ways no longer reflects the world we actually live in.
I just started getting bored of just conventional movies, and I just wanted to see if there was some place that I could go that was more like a sensory experience, you know, that felt almost more like a audiovisual drugs or something, aesthetic drugs, or just some type of what comes after kind of linear movies.
The old world is no more. No more time. No more truths. We have been flattened by a great force.
At times, Aggro Drift could also feel like some strange video game, as if smashing together some avant-garde indie experience with the violent grandeur of GTA Vice City. But it's 2024's Baby Invasion that makes an even more explicit connection to this new medium and others like it that have come to dominate the media landscape in recent years. The premise, which is detailed in a brief prologue, is actually quite interesting. A group of video game developers set out to create a first-person shooter that lets people play as criminals raiding the mansions of rich people, and which was designed to be so hyper-realistic that players would fall into a kind of trance. Before the game was finished, however, it leaked onto the dark web, where it became an underground phenomenon and led to a serious unintended side effect, which is that people actually started committing these crimes for real while broadcasting them as live stream entertainment that, thanks to filters and other AI enhancements, became indistinguishable from that of the game.
The concept really comes from like the moment, this idea that people will in the future or even now start to live stream their crimes. And this is now entertainment in a lot of ways for people.
The setup seems like it serves to implant a seed of ontological doubt under the techno-fueled assault on the senses that follows. Are we watching the game or the real-life criminals inspired by it? But the question is kind of a misdirection in itself, because both are true and both are false. This is the core idea of baby invasion. There is no more real life, the movie declares. There's just now, the endless now. Reality is what we make of it, and in this moment, this is what it looks like. As with Spring Breakers, the vision is an obvious exaggeration, a heightened version of a cultural moment that is nevertheless marked by some rather bleak developments, like the erosion of truth and meaning in favor of mindless entertainment, and the general detachment from reality in favor of worlds of artifice in which real violence, or the promise of real violence, is just part of the simulation, part of the fun, not categorically different from, let's say, Netflix live streaming a man free climbing a skyscraper, where the very real tension of him potentially falling to his death becomes just another source of dopamine for an excited audience. An audience that might even have a little devil inside them that is secretly hoping for something catastrophic to happen. In this sense, Baby Invasion does fit into a tradition of movies that have already explored this fragile boundary between entertainment and violence, and that have already imagined what can happen when that boundary falls apart.
Why don't you just kill us?
You shouldn't forget the importance of entertainment.
But compared to such titles, there is a notable difference in the nature of the quote-unquote evil that is depicted in Baby Invasion. As we see the nameless, baby-faced criminals go about their crimes, there's a remarkable absence of any form of passion. There's no lust, no sadistic delight, there's barely even any real violence. Instead, the whole experience is strikingly banal. It's just a passive consumption of the barest of impulses, coming at you in a pulsating monotone that is as overstimulating as it is mind-numbing. Actually, come to think of it, maybe the more relevant touchstone here is the author David Foster Wallace and his rants on the dangers of television. I know he didn't live to see the kind of world that is depicted in Baby Invasion, but what he said about TV and the early internet does feel painfully prescient. To quote him from the David Lipsky book, "I can receive entertainment and stimulation without having to give anything back but the most tangential kind of attention. And that is very seductive. The technology is just gonna get better and better and better and better. And it's gonna get easier and easier and more convenient and more pleasurable to be alone with images on a screen, given to us by people who do not love us but want our money." Which is alright in low doses, right? But if that's the basic main staple of your diet, you're gonna die. In a meaningful way, you're going to die. Towards the end of the movie, there's a strange sequence where the criminals open some kind of portal, after which a godlike figure smites them down with lightning bolts, which might suggest some kind of righteous reckoning. But as we then transcend into the stars, Corinne muddies the water again by cutting back to the game developer from the prologue, who says that although she prayed to God to stop the game never actually stopped. It plays on forever and only grows more popular.
Sometimes you don't, as a director and as the writer, you don't necessarily want to also describe your intent, or prescribe meaning to everything, because then it's almost like you're suffocating it, It's nice. You want to make movies that allow people to dream it up, and to feel. I think it's okay to feel confused or emotionally confused, or to find certain things abstract or more ambiguous. I think it's okay. I think that's good.
After the release of Baby Invasion, Corinne talked about Hollywood crumbling creatively and being so stuck in its ways that some kind of evolution is simply inevitable.
They're losing a lot of the most talented and creative minds to gaming and to streamers. Like Aisha Speed is a movie, Kai Cenat is a movie, but really they're so locked in on convention. And then all those kids that are so creative are now just going to find other outlets and go other places, because movies are no longer the dominant art form.
No, like just get closer, but put it up.
Aisha Speed is,
like that.
The new Tarkovsky.
Though he's probably exaggerating here, he's known to do that in interviews. These comments, I think, do reveal something essential, both about Corinne's feelings about the future of art and cinema, as well as on his more foundational philosophy of humanity. Because if there's one thing Corinne has demonstrated over and over again, if there's one core principle that has remained stable throughout his strange and eclectic career, it's that whether you give him a big Hollywood production, a beat-up VHS camera or a GoPro, whether he has a paintbrush, a typewriter or a computer, he's going to find some way to use it. He's going to find some way to create, to express himself. And this also reflects something meaningful about how he sees everyone else, how he looks at humanity in general, and what qualities he finds within it. This is the true singularity. It's not just the idea of one separate mediums increasingly converging into one thing. It's also the more general realization that they all already came from the same place to begin with. Movies, books, music, art, and now the new world of video games, streaming, and other forms of online content creation. In its essence, it's all the same thing. It's all the same humanity searching for self-expression and for meaning. The same humanity that enjoys distraction and entertainment, in whatever variation seems most exciting, most effective in the moment. And yes, these new forms can come at the expense of some of the older ones.
And film is going to, not all film, but a lot of film will just stagnate and be just huge IP, or just this kind of very rarefied experience.
And yes, we can be right to be critical of the direction that our society is heading towards. Can be wary of how new cultural vices take shape, how new technologies invade our social world, which Corinne in some ways feels even more honest about than most through his piercing gaze that always cuts right through the romanticism of any surface-level ideal, to expose the often less flattering desire hiding beneath it. To expose the truth, as challenging and confusing as it can be, long before we're quite ready to face it. Indeed, as one critic recently put it, Corinne has always made artwork so ahead of its time that it feels jarring upon release, only to become a cultural waypoint in retrospect. But where Corinne truly distinguishes himself, I think, is in the way in which his work never amounts to a blanket condemnation. Because what he also seems to understand, and seems to innately understand, is that every new generation also finds real joy and meaning in the particular culture and technologies of their time, as shallow or empty as it might appear to the older ones. He understands that everyone will always find their way to self-expression, will always find some way to connect with one another, regardless of their circumstances, their disposition, or place in society. And the only real purpose of art is to see that, to be willing to see that, because it's the articulation of it, of all of it, that lets us understand who we are. In this sense, I do feel like Corinne is, weirdly enough, a true humanist at heart, and which is why I just can't help but admire his work so much, you know, warts and all. From the foul-mouthed little cowboys to the troubled schizophrenic, the grandiose flying nuns to the elderly trash humpers, the spring breakers, the beach bum, and all the weird stuff that came after. There's just such a genuine curiosity within his filmmaking philosophy, such an open-mindedness with which he approaches every new thing, every new story, as if already knowing that whatever he's going to find, there's going to be something human at its foundation, some essence of meaning that's longing to express itself.
You know, I've always done everything because I always felt like it was all the same, because I always felt like they all spoke to the same thing, and
it's all made by a human with a thumb print.
There was something I've been chasing my whole life, which is what's beyond a kind of articulation.
And it's building a house, and some of the movies and some of the art and some of the writings are the floor and the bathroom and the chimney, and then at the end of it you've created this thing that you can live in. But what it says, I'll never tell you.
There's something strangely beautiful about seeing the world as Harmony Korine does. It's like a gaze that transforms the mundane into something profound. A creative spirit that can elevate anything into an artwork. And whenever I want to experience it for myself, whenever I feel like I need to be reminded that yes, there is indeed a world of wonder and meaning around us, that's when I turn to MUBI. MUBI is a curated online cinema streaming hand-picked movies from around the globe. They offer a vast library of fantastic movies from iconic directors to emerging auteurs, and from timeless masterpieces to hidden gems and festival favorites. They are currently streaming Mr. Lonely in the US and Canada, which I think might just be Korine's most underrated movie, as it tends to be somewhat overshadowed by his more eccentric work, even though it's nevertheless a wonderfully absurd cinematic experience. Spring Breakers is also available in selected territories, and beyond that, MUBI features plenty of other amazing filmmakers that are pushing the boundaries of storytelling. There really is no better way to start exploring the riches of cinema, and if you go to mubi.com/likestoriesofold, you can try MUBI right now for free for 30 days. So head on over to MUBI to start your free month of great cinema today.